Okay, we are ready to roll now. Well, thank you for coming to our Southside Virginia Writing Project webinar series. I believe, Suzanne, I think this is our fourth so far. I believe that is correct. But just to tell you a little bit about kind of who we are and how we got here. So, the Southside Virginia Rating Project is actually part of the National Rating Project. And if you can believe it, this year the National Rating Project celebrated its 50th year. I know, like, yes, exactly. Celebration is in order. And it was started by a high school English teacher. And of course, we love our high school English teacher. And James Gray was doing research in his classroom and he was writing with other teachers. And then they were talking about the writing that they were doing and how the writing they were doing and studying their own writing process really impacted how they taught writing in the classroom. And they're like, wow, we are on to something. So James later went on to found the Bay Area Writing Project, which was the very first project at University of California at Berkeley. And now, if you can believe it, there are over 175 sites across the United States. We actually have a number of international sites. Virginia is very well represented. We have not one, not two, not three, but 7 sites. And of course, the one that you are with today is the Southside Virginia Writing Project at Longwood University in good old Farmville, Virginia. And each year, writing project sites work with over 2,000 districts across the country, which is pretty amazing. Most research studies will say that the National Writing Project has the most thoroughly developed and expansive and long-running professional development of any professional development. So that is quite a task. We do all of our writing projects, over 80,000 hours of professional development with faculty at K-12 schools and universities. And then one of the really cool things is we have young authors camps. And last year, Writing Project Site served over 35,000 young kids that came to campus and did great writing work in national parks, on campus, in schools, and also online. And the other really cool thing about writing projects is that we have got great support from fabulous authors. And on the National Writing Project site, there is like an expansive list, and there's actually a podcast where a lot of these great authors are interviewed. But I just pulled 4 that I knew are near and dear to our heart. And then, of course, Meg Medina up there in the top right is a local fabulous writer. And I know I use her books in my classroom, and she actually lives here in Richmond, which is pretty fabulous. But last thing about as far as the Southside Virginia Writing Project, really kind of some of the belief structures that are really framing up the work that we do, and specifically the work that we do this summer, is this idea that great teachers of writing write themselves. Suzanne and I were just talking about having a writing retreat, and we're going to be sending that information out soon. And also that all teachers are teachers of writing. Sometimes folks will say, oh, the National Writing Project is elementary school teachers and English teachers, and we love our English and elementary folks, but we also have health and PE and science and social studies and the arts and modern language and you name it, because writing is a way to learn. The other idea is that literacy really does have a research base and a pedagogy that can be taught. And the way that we do that work is we do PD in schools. Sometimes I do that work, but we have a great, fabulous team that you're hearing from throughout our webinars this summer. And so the idea is that we want our local teachers doing that work in their local schools and districts. We've got our Summer Institute, which is actually ending no, Saturday, which is always an exciting event. We have our young authors camps, and I mentioned our writing retreats. And last but not least, it's this idea that really is the foundation of the National Writing Project's work, that of teachers as leaders, and that teachers are absolutely best positioned to provide PD in their schools. So we don't want like publishers coming in and doing that work. We want teachers that are housed in their school, who have a relationship with the faculty and have that expertise to do that work. And in the National Writing Project, one of some of the terminology that we use is that teachers come into the writing project and we call them teacher fellows. And then as they get experience and start doing that professional development in their schools, we call them teacher consultants. So if you were to go to a writing project, let's say in New Mexico, and you said you were a teaching consultant in Virginia with the Southside Virginia Writing Project, they'd say, oh my gosh, this is amazing. We'd love to put you to work. But today, the excitement continues because Susanne, get ready for this, is going to be talking about how do I teach critical thinking this year and critical writing using a strategy toolkit. And let me tell you a little bit more about the very, very, very fabulous and wonderful Susanne. She has kind of done it all, my friend. She has been a classroom teacher, an instructional coach, a professional developer, program specialist, system change consultant, but wait, there is more. Also, an associate director of curriculum and instruction, and she does an amazing job of taking a range of roles to support school-based faculty members as reflective practitioners and to lift their voices to the larger educational community. And with that, I am going to stop sharing my screen so that Susanne can take over. All right, my friend, it's all you.
Sounds great. So now we'll just lower our expectations after that because
No, no, no.
that's where we're going to be. There is a slide deck for today. I have dropped it in the chat. I'll also project it on the screen. I know that we're recording and there are going to be some people joining us at a later date. Today is part of a lead up to a big deal webinar that we're going to do on July 30th. That's going to be largely focused on some science and social studies and cross-curricular. Like Dorothy said, the National Writing Project is not just about language arts, it's about everybody. And I am going to reveal, oh, but we're recording, maybe I shouldn't. So I was a member of the Eastern Virginia Writing Project as a newbie, and I became a fully qualified National Writing Project member, a teacher consultant in 1998, which is so awkward because I'm in my 20s. So it just doesn't make sense mathematically how that works. But if you've ever seen Doctor Who, you understand that, sometimes it's timey-wimey, and so it's fine. And so, and when I joined the National Writing Project, I was a math teacher, ninth grade math teacher. And I came in exploring and writing about slope and got a chance to participate in our national conference and present on Pechakucha, which I still don't say correctly, and how we could do some storytelling with word problems and all of that. And so I am living proof that you do not have to be a language arts person to have entered into the project. And to point that out, we'll talk about a bunch of different things today with cognitive writing that talk about different content areas. But again, if you're going to hang with us or watch today, we do want you to come back on July 30th or catch up with that one because we are going to get deeper into the applications of cognitive writing. So this is us thinking about teaching critical thinking this year. So we are the National Writing Project. So we're not just Virginia, but we're the Southside Virginia Writing Project. So we're going to talk about the SOLs, and our new SOLs are very much focused on higher order thinking skills, critical thinking skills. And that's a bit of a shift for us. And those of us who are in the other states, some of us have been on Common Core for a little while and they've already been doing that. And so we've got some transitions going on. When we think about teaching critical thinking, cognitive writing is a great opportunity to think about that. So I am going to stop sharing my screen just for a minute because I have many things to show, and um, I'll need a little screen for that. All right. Dorothy, am I on screen so I can start holding books up? Yes, okay, cool. All righty. So the first thing that I do want to do is say I'm going to refer to a book in a minute that looks like this. It's called The New Classroom Instruction That Works. Yours probably isn't written on if you have this, but if you don't have it, it's the new Marzano. I'll talk about that. I'm also going to refer to Taking Action from the National Council of Teachers for NCTM. I can't say it. It's the math teachers group. Taking Action. And it doesn't matter if you have K5, 6, 8, or 9, 12. So if that's your area. Another visual cue, Dorothy talked about the series of the webinars that we're doing. And so the culminating one for the summer is going to be to pry in cognitive writing and critical thinking. And so this is sort of a precursor to that. So that is one of the reasons we wanted to record this. So those are the things that I wanted to show you. And I will start sharing again. All right. So Dorothy, if people come in, can you drop the link in the chat? Awesome. It's not necessary for you to have it, but just in case you want it. So some of us remember Marzano. Marzano. Anybody remember Marzano? It was a big deal. And so Marzano wasn't actually the name of the book. Marzano was the lead author for McREL, and it is the research review that we use because, as Dorothy has said, there is a pedagogy base, there is a research base behind everything that we do. And so as National Writing Project, we want to make sure that we're lifting all of those pieces up as we go. And we decided that cognitive writing would be a great one to lift up from the new classroom instruction that works. So the new Marzano, which Marzano doesn't work there anymore. So it's Goodwin and Rouleau. And so we'll just call it the new Marzano for a minute. And so, yes, you absolutely should have that in your hands. So one of the questions that comes up is, why don't we have it in our hands? And the awkward part is that we got the new classroom instruction that works in 2019, and everybody had it in their hands around March of 2020, which was an awkward time to get an exciting new book because in March of 2020, we shifted our focus of what we cared about because we were in a brave new world of something else with the COVID pandemic. And so we were a lot more concerned about making sure that all first graders could get online and that everybody had a Chromebook and that we could do a pickup of lunches and breakfast and everything else. And then we were mailing things. Like it was just a lot. And so for a lot of us, we missed out on the new rollout of what we knew to be true. And so what we know to be true is the classroom instruction, new classroom instruction that works. This is our new Marzano. These are the empirical studies that tell us what is effective for student learning, which is awesome. And we're very excited about it. It's just we haven't had a chance to explore it. So we're going to do that now. So this is what Marzano looks like in the modern age in 2025. And there's two things going on. So first, you could just call this NCITW or New Classroom Instruction That Works. I always make the joke about New Marzano. There's two things going on. So the first thing is that it's based in neuroscience. So if we have spent our time thinking about universal design for learning, then we are in good shape because universal design for learning was neuroscience. It was all brain-based. It was based on CAT scans, PET scans, all kinds of fancy neuroscience. With brain researchers and psychologists coming together to figure out how do we make sure that everything that we know to be true in education is based in science. So the fun part is after we got rolling with universal design for learning, all of the research started into the neuroscience pieces. Well, it takes a long time for research to cook. You got to try it. You gotta collect data. You got to have some peer review. You got to get things published. It's got to enter the world and people need to replicate. And so the research review that came out around 2020, 2019, that we kind of missed out on, which is our current pedagogical basis, is that we should use neuroscience. that's fun. So the learning phases that you'll see in the image, first you have to become interested in something, cognitive interest cues. Second is you have to commit to learning. We talk about learning targets a lot. Some of us have gotten away from it. We need to get back. Then we have to focus on new learning, which is a little bit of a challenge because your working memory can only commit to focusing for a few minutes, and it can only keep about 4 things in the working memory. So focusing on new learning is tough. If I walk into a room, so let's say I'm in 4th grade and I walk into the room. I've been in one classroom all morning and now I'm in a different classroom in the afternoon after lunch. And the first thing that happens is you've moved my desk. And the second thing that happened is my tummy hurts. So I already have 2 things taking up my working memory. So if the third one is I need to go get my notebook, then I actually probably can't hear the directions that are happening right now because my working memory is completely overloaded. So if something isn't in my long-term memory, if I don't have mental models, if I don't have sort of that lizard brain working of, I know how to do this because it's just what we do, it's routine in my long-term memory, then I can't do it, which is challenging if we're thinking about higher order thinking skills. So then number 4 is making sense of learning. So making sense of learning is all that putting things in your long-term memory. Number 5, practice and reflect. That's that 21 times makes a habit. You gotta get a mental model into your long-term memory so that you can use it without a lot of cognitive load. And then number 6 is a little bit of a shocker these days because with the new SOLs that we have, extend and apply is no longer optional. So a lot of times in the past, we've said extension activities are for gifted students or advanced students or for students who finish and master early. Extend and apply is now the baseline. So extend and apply is now our baseline. So the minimum competency standards are now extend and apply. And so if we stop at practice and reflect, we actually haven't hit the rigor of the SOL. So that's a challenge. So if you look at the outside of the art, then you'll see those are all of the teacher moves that I can take as an educator so that in my classroom, I can make sure that I have cognitive interest cues. I have hooks. I've connected things to students' prior knowledge. I've got some learning targets. I've given them some strategies that they can use, like a learner-owned strategy, often through self-regulated strategy development or SRSD. And then I'm going to jump all the way over to the right-hand side and I'm going to jump past retrieval practice, which is the basic facts. I'm going to jump past space versus mass practice, which is a big hatty one of you can't teach everything all at the same time and never come back to it. You got to revisit it to make sure that students can still do it. I'm going to jump to cognitive writing. And so in the past, some of us have treated cognitive writing as a nice to have. So it's an extension activity if there's time, kind of like a dessert. Like if we have time at the end, maybe we'll write an essay about this. If we have time at the end, we might write something about it. But now cognitive writing is in fact the way that sense making happens. So if you look back down at the neuroscience part here, the learning phases in number 4, making sense of learning. We're not waiting for cognitive writing to be a dessert to write an essay. We're waiting for cognitive writing to be the way that we organize our thoughts. It's the way that we make sense of the world. And excitingly, cognitive writing is going to connect to the term discourse. So we've always talked about discourse largely as being verbal. It's the conversation back and forth. But written discourse is also important. Committing your ideas to paper when they're sufficiently complex, like a 2-step problem in math, or a cycle in science, or claim evidence reasoning in English or history or science or really anything. When we write those down, it's easier for a peer to keep up and critique and feedback and compare and contrast and reflect, which is the level of the SOL. So all of that is to say, everything leads towards us needing to spend a little more time on cognitive writing. So we thought it would be worth spending an hour on it. So I'm going to stop saying Marzano and I'll say NCITW. So these are the updated evidence-based strategies. I do want to lift up for number 4 that strategy, instruction, and modeling is HLP 14 for the high leverage practices for students with disabilities, which is a really critical one for us. And then a lot of others of these are also connected to high leverage practices for students with disabilities, and they're also connected to the language routines for English language learners. So all of our pieces are coming together, which is such a relief because it's hard to keep track of English language learners and kids with disabilities and the evidence bases. And these are also the foundations of everything being recommended by NCTM and NCTE CTE and NSTA and all of our professional organizations. So the cognitive lift for us is getting a little bit easier, where you're going to start hearing all of the same language everywhere. All right. So if you think to yourself, oh my gosh, I have to learn more about this right now, I totally agree. So these are some podcasts that are worth listening to while you're driving, while you're cleaning the kitchen, wandering around, working out. Um, I will lift up Principal Center Radio. This third one is a lovely 29-minute overview with the authors where they explain the background of why everything works in a much better way than I did. And then I very much enjoyed number 4 for those of us who are gym night coaches. I know we have a lot of coaches in our National Writing Project group. The Brian Goodwin interview with Jim Knight really gets into the what makes things hard and what makes them easy, and how do we move from a 4 to a 5, or when we're practicing in our classrooms. So that's the background of why cognitive writing. So this isn't just a fun thing to do that came out of the blue that somebody recommended. This is in fact one of the 14 strategies that will get students across the finish line to higher order thinking. So we're going to dig into cognitive writing right now, and you are going to need something to write with that isn't lipstick. So you'll probably want a pencil or a crayon or a marker, or it doesn't even matter. And you probably want a piece of paper, and you don't have to show it if you don't want to. So I'm going to give everybody, including people who are watching on the replay, a second to get themselves something to write with. All right, so as we get ourselves organized, I will say that the cognitive writing component of the McREL Research Review has 7 empirical studies in it. It's not all that many, but it takes a long time for them to get some empirical studies in there, and you'll see that the numbers of participants are pretty high. One thing that is fascinating is it's getting very difficult to find standalone studies about a specific intervention. So if you click on the link, which you don't have to do right now, if you click on the link, you'll see that most of the studies also include something else like direct instruction, explicit instruction, guided practice, or cognitive interest cues or visualizations, or vocabulary instruction. And the reason for that is most folks who are using evidence-based practices are using a set of them because they understand that toolkits come in a group. And students need to use multiple strategies at the same time. So you're not going to do cognitive writing if you didn't have any visualization strategies, or if you didn't have any pre-writing strategies, things like that. And if you don't have strategy, and if you have strategy instruction and you don't have direct instruction of some kind, then the students don't learn the strategy, because all strategy instruction requires explicit instruction. So those are some fun facts about that. All right, so you are going to also need, in addition to something to write with that, and something to write on that isn't a friend, you are going to need a copy of the Learning Strategy Toolkit. So if you click on it, it will ask you to make a copy. So I'm going to let you do that. And then I'm going to give you about a minute to scan through it so that you can see it, and then I will share again. So as you make your copy, that's one that you own, so you can write in it, delete it, add to it, make notes in it, get rid of it. Anything is fine. All right. We will come back to that in a minute. So it's just a list of learning strategies. This isn't every learning strategy. There are many, many, many learning strategies. This is a set of learning strategies that we're using locally in a lot of different schools that we've compiled because they reflect things that some of our local colleagues are doing. And I think that last week we heard about SCORE. For yes, students working together. I think we had thieves maybe and steal. Okay, so several of them, if you go back into the recordings of the others, you'll get to hear those things and see them. And you'll get to see the accountable talk piece, which we're going to get into. And we want you to see how all the pieces tie together. So even though we're not all in the same webinar at the same time, we are all listening to each other. All right. So now that we have our learning strategies in front of us, I want to show you something. So let's see if this video will work. So you have a piece of paper in front of you. You can take notes or not. I'm going to have you watch something, and there is no sound, so you shouldn't be hearing any sound. You should just be seeing a thing. All right. All right. So what do you notice and what do you wonder? What do you notice and what do you wonder? All right. What do you notice and what do you wonder? I'm going to show the first one again. What do you notice? What do you wonder? There's the second one. What do you notice and what do you wonder? All right, when you're ready, put a notice and a wonder in the chat. If you're watching the recording, then you get to have a conversation with yourself. What do you notice? What do you wonder? Hello, me. I noticed this. All right, whenever you're ready. Perfect. Okay. We notice a yellow flower. We wonder why she's all alone and living just a little bit, perhaps a bad hip. Noticing a lone dandelion, great word choice, lone dandelion in a field of grass, wondering where it is. Okay. All right, now let's do a notice and wonder. What do we notice about the bottom of this picture that's on the screen? What do we notice is written there? What do we notice about that's written on the screen, and what do we wonder about what's written on the screen? Oh, I wonder if it's a dandelion. Yes. I'm going to show you the first one again. What do you what do you see on the screen in the first one? What do you see on the screen in the second one? Day 20. Are we tracking the same dandelion over 20 days? All right. Does anyone have a thought about that? Does anyone also wonder that? Oh, wondering if it's the same plant. Yeah. All right. So we have some thoughts about this. Are we ready for the next one? Here we go. So that was day 1. This is day 20. What do you notice? What do you wonder? What do you notice? What do you wonder? If you want to write in the chat, go ahead. Oh, we think she's happy to have friends, wondering where they are, wanting to visit. Yes. Noticing there are more dandelions in the grass and wondering where they were before. Where did these come from? More flower leaves. Yes. And I noticed the field is covered, and I wonder if it's springtime in Canada. I like a little context. There we go. So, so what we want to do right now is take off our student hat, because we have our student hat on right now, and put on our teacher hat. And I want you to think about a couple things and then share your thoughts in the chat, or you're welcome to unmute. Um, why does this require wait time? Why do we have to give students wait time? Did you notice the long pause? We looked at something, notice a wonder, a long time passed. We looked at another thing, a long time passed, probably not long enough. Um, and I apologize for that. So what is the interaction between critical thinking and wait time? Okay, so information processing. All right, Alicia's got us started. So what do
I
we,
would say that we're looking for, we need time to look for similarities and differences
yeah, why do you think it takes so long to find similarities and differences when you're a kid?
because I think their attention, like they're they're still learning everything. For one, their attention is short a lot of times, but also they may not understand the categories yet, like how to categorize information and to like group it to say, okay, this makes sense. Okay, I see a pattern here. So, especially with like with abstract images.
Right. So what you're lifting up is that students don't have the mental models to drop these into buckets. So whereas adults, we know that these are mental models, and we know that this is going to be a lone dandelion, she's all alone, and if she goes to seed, I know we've made her a she because Dorothy got us started with that. So we've already personified this character. And I have a great storybook that goes with this that I'm so desperate to show all of you. And I may just do it because I don't know that you can stop me at this point. Um, and then we look at this in our mental model, as Danielle pointed out. Our mental model is, oh, day 20, oh, these are all going to float away. We might even bring one into the classroom and then blow them away, right? To see what happens, and then make all the custodians mad at us because there's like dandelion fluff everywhere. And then we have a mental model that says this is seed dispersal. So we could put it all in one place and say, oh, this is what it is. But the challenge is that we've got to give the students time to formulate this because they're discovering it for themselves, but we don't want them to discover it alone. We want to give them the prompts and the scaffolds and the supports. And like Dorothy said, it takes courage to share out your ideas. You need a little bit of time. And there are some other things that we probably do for students, right? Like scaffolds. We might give them a sentence stem. We might give them a couple of words to use. English language learners, kids with disabilities, they might want some of those sentence starters. And in some cases, students are going to have the background knowledge and they're going to be itching to share because they know the answer to this and they do this at like, and so now we've got to figure out how do we make sure that it's an equitable discussion zone so that the discourse can happen where it's not the same students all the time. And so challenge here is it probably doesn't feel like any of this has anything to do with cognitive writing. And I'm going to take it even farther from cognitive writing right now, which is, can you draw for me right now on whatever you want to draw on, not another person? Can you draw for me what you noticed about the first day, the 20th day, and the 100th day in any way that you want? Go ahead and draw a picture. We're going to take about 2 minutes. Can you draw this? And there's our scaffold. So another few moments to draw. And while you all are drawing, I will show on my screen A Place to Grow is an amazing picture book. If you haven't seen it before, there she is, the little seed. See her going with all of her little fluff. And it is it's a storybook about finding your place. And each time she lands, she's not yet in a place to grow. But if you would like to see her, there she is on the wind, right there on the wind. And this is a nice version of the Notice and Note Sketch to Stretch that we're doing right now, where you could be reading a storybook or you could be doing some science and you can still sketch out your thoughts. So does anybody want to hold their sketch up to their camera? Is anyone interested? I know Dorothy would love to, you can tell. Oh yeah, hang on, I will stop sharing so we can see. Oh, look at that. Would you like to tell us anything about it? You don't have to if you don't want to. You'll have to unmute.
That would help, wouldn't it? I think one of the things I love, I mean, I have loved to draw since I was little. It's kind of how I make sense of the world. And having a moment to sit back and really look, it also kind of makes me think of like Reggio Emilia and like documentation for children. Something kind of, it helps you look at it in a brand new way. I was thinking a lot about texture and why that changes and the purpose and then how everything kind of floats out into the field. And yeah, it was a lot of fun. It helped me think of it in a new way. And now you're muted.
Of
I
course
know
I
it
am.
never gets easy.
Oh. Does anybody else want to share out a picture? Chris, you want to share out a picture?
I wasn't gonna, no, I'm not gonna share a picture, but what I was thinking about is I typically use Notice and Wonder as a protocol for looking at data, right? And so it's really interesting, right, to put it into this context, right? When I'm leading teams through what do you notice? What do you wonder? And so this was interesting to kind of use it like this. And it made me think about when you're talking about the wait time, that giving the wait time, because if students don't have the experience of being asked to think like this, then they need more time to be able to do that. So if you're not being asked to compare, if you're not being asked to process, I can notice all day long. I see, but that's the wonder piece where you're taking it to a different level. And if that's not something they have a lot of experience with, the wait time allows them to hopefully take a chance and be a little bit more comfortable with where they are in their growth.
And I love that you said protocol for Notice and Wonder, because that lets us talk about this as a routine where 21 times might make a habit. And on my second or third time, I'm going to get so good at this. Danielle, what were you thinking? This goes nicely with what you talked about before with like compare and contrast.
Well, like I'm driving, but I would have drawn literally like a circle because I'm a special ed teacher. So I would have drawn a circle for the first day one. For day two, I would have drawn a circle with like some spikes, and then day three, I would have drawn a bunch of. I mean, day 120, I would have drawn a bunch of circles. That's um, and it would, and I was just thinking how different my picture would look from Miss Dorothy's, because for a couple of reasons. My picture is simple. I try to teach my students like hurry up, and draw the information before you forget, and just draw. Like I try to teach them the protocol of drawing really simple like stick figures so they can get into the habit of it. But I would not have. I didn't realize about the seeds spreading in the wind. So my picture would have just literally been the three images that I saw, and it would not have included that background knowledge. Because I don't know much about flowers like that. I don't know, I didn't really even know whether for sure or not that was a dandelion or not. Like the one with the little furries. I've seen it all, but I didn't know that they were all like really connected from my background knowledge. I just didn't. Um but I like how she showed her background knowledge and those details in her picture, which that's another way that you can kind of as a teacher, when I'm looking at it from my teacher's lens, I can kind of differentiate a little bit more. Like, okay, she has some background knowledge maybe on this topic, or maybe it's just what she imagined. I might have to talk to her a little bit more. And then it could be other students too who may not have drawn as much, but like they know it, and I just have to like pull it out of them because I need them to provide. I want them to work on providing more details in their writing. So I like this concept. I can see how it relates to writing. Um, and I think I could also like get kids to add more details, like to help them figure out when they get stuck about what to write. Like, okay, well, let's add some more details in your picture that you can think about, and then we can write those details we can incorporate those details into your final writing to expand it.
And that is exactly where we should be right now. So thank you, Danielle. That's perfect. We're going to try to do multiple screens and multiple everything right now. So y'all get ready. Hold on to your hats. So a few things. I'm going to share something out of the Learning Strategy Toolkit. So we're going to go all the way to the last page. I want to pull up To Pry. To Pry has a dance. I won't be doing the dance right now. However, there is a dance if you ever want to know it.
There is, and she does it really well.
Do it. Do it.
She won't, but you just need to, that could be a video in the future that when you bring this up, you just click on the video and there you are.
Yeah, that's the joy of making dances for kids, which is we get to perform them all the time, right? And so To Pry is a way to support kids in analyzing or developing models. And we're developing a model right now with the dandelion spread, right? And like Danielle lifted up, like most people aren't around when a dandelion over the course of 20 days goes to seed. Like unless you grew up with that or it's in your yard or something like that, there's no real reason why you would know that. And so we would want to explicitly teach it. And so To Pry is a super fun way, comes from the National Science Teachers Association. And then our strategy instruction folks made it into a mnemonic and added a dance. So To Pry is a way to pry open a picture. And I will do the dance really fast. So when I have a model, I'll probably have a title on it. Could be up high, could be down low, could be up high, could be down low. And there'll be parts, but they could be anywhere. Like that day 1 was at the bottom, the day 20 was at the bottom, but it could have been up at the top. And you said dandelion in the corner. And then the relationships are often, and this will matter, arrows. So we make little arrows and the arrows go everywhere. And then we ask ourselves, why is this happening? So I know Dorothy and Chris are about to do this dance with me and we're really excited. So here we go, because they're on screen right now and I can see them. So here we go. Ready? So where's the title? It could be up high. Where else could it be? Down low. Could also be up high. And let's put it back down low. Yeah. We could have parts, but they could be anywhere, right? Anywhere, 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 anywhere. Got to find that. That's where that day 100 was. All right. What about relationships? They're arrows. Arrows could go anywhere, right? They could go between day 1 and day 20 and day 100, maybe in that circle that Danielle was talking about. And then we have to ask ourselves, why is this happening? There we go. See, there we go. We did dance. And so like Danielle was talking about, we would cue our students, okay, do we want to give this a title? So the title could be like a change in a flower or something with seeds, like, and every title could be different. We could start labeling our parts and put words on there because that's going to give us some vocabulary. And then our relationships, we're going to put some arrows. The arrows might not be right. It's okay. Let's just put some arrows. Do we think that this is a cycle, right? Or do we think it's just a series? Is it a sequence? Timelines are a big deal for kids when they're growing up. And then why do we think this is happening? And so we could pull this learning strategy out here because it would help us with our notice and wonder. So now we have a protocol of notice and wonder. We have a routine of to pry. See how all of our pieces are coming in? And the more times that children do this, the lower the cognitive load. So we're doing very high level discussion. But if I'm used to doing this, if this is a routine and procedure that I do in my classroom all the time, it's actually not overwhelming me. It's just engaging me. So I want to jump back over to, all right, so we saw a phenomena, we noticed and wondered, and we drew it. And then here's where we're at. We could then do a gallery walk around the room and look at everybody's pictures, right? And we could compare and contrast and look for alike and different, another protocol. We could give feedback to other students, we could talk to them, or we could just do it in our partner pair. And the teacher could walk around and then on a clipboard identify like who's going to report out first and maybe hold up their picture, who's going to report out second and hold up their picture. And the reason that we care about this is cognitive writing requires me to have enough information that I need to make sense of something. And so I'm going to go back in the slide deck real fast so that you can see. So what we're doing right now is we're focusing on our new learning and we're making sense of that learning, but it's not in buckets yet. The mental model isn't there yet. What we want to do is we want to use some cognitive writing to make sense of it. So we're going to use the images from seeing the day 1, the day 20, and the day 100, the model that we just drew that we're going to add some, if we have more time. We don't have more time. This stuff takes a little while. But we could say this is a seed and this is where the wind would come in and this is where it could the seeds could plant themselves. We could ask some questions that we answered the following day. We could read the storybook and find out a narrative experience that told us like and this is all student-centered instruction. And what it's doing is it's going to give us up here peer assisted consolidation of learning. The more that we're talking in discourse, the more that it's going to connect for a student to stay in their long-term memory. But at some point in time, and we're going to do this right now, we would write at least one sentence about what we think is happening. So Danielle's not going to do this because she's driving. But we're all, and I'm going to do this too, we're all going to take just a minute, wait time, independent work time, and we're going to write a sentence that starts to capture what our thoughts are. And I'm going to show you the picture again. So I'm going to be quiet and you're going to write a sentence. If you want to write more than one sentence, you can write as many as you want, but you have to write one. All right, I'm going to interrupt us, even though some of us are doing a good job elaborating, and I'm going to give us a challenge. I want you to, and I would normally with students, I would have them share out with their partner before, but in the interest of time, because it's already 1:55, I'm going to give you a challenge and say, I'd like you to pick one Awubis word and one fanboy word to add into the sentence you've already written or the sentences you've already written and revise what you wrote. Okay, that's your challenge. So pick one of these words, one from Awubis and one from fanboys, any of the words, and add it in. So we'll take another minute. All right, does anyone want to read one of their sentences out loud and share? Or write it in the chat?
I can read mine.
Thank you.
So, I'm an English person, so it's a so get ready. I put, let me see if I can read my own handwriting, which is a challenge. Dandelions are on a poetic journey, standing alone, attempting to make sense of who they are. Then, once figuring it out, they open themselves up and their ideas to spread across the world as they find their community, people different but connected to themselves.
Love it. I'm going to compare that. I'm going to add mine into yours. That'll give some people things to compare, and then we'll see if anybody else wants. I said before there were lots and lots of flowers. The one flower got very, very fluffy. So different writing style, but still used one of the Awubis and Fanboys words, which we call coordinating and supporting conjunctions. Does anybody else want to share one? Okay, so what we're doing right now is we're actually getting into revision. So when we add in some of these relationships words, we're adding in a very safe space for revision. So subjunction, coordinating and subordinating conjunctions are actually just relationship signalers. I know we've used them as editing marks in the past, but they've moved to 4th grade now because we're using them for sense making. And so sometimes just giving a little challenge lets me say, okay, so you guys have to use 3 Awubis words and 2 fanboys in your explanation. Well, now I'm seeking relationships. I'm digging a little bit deeper. I'm revising. I might be talking to my neighbor about this. And so when we think about using your toolkit skills, at this point, we've used a notice and wonder protocol. We've used our to pry model building strategy. We have used our Awubis and Fanboys schema really for adding in relationships words, coordinating, subordinating conjunctions, and we revised, which is a tough thing for students, tolerance for revision. And we've done some compare and contrast. We could also add in a million other things, but this is the beginning of seeing the cognitive writing as part of the sense-making process. And I thought it would be fun if we started with science because 1, science requires cognitive writing, and 2, it's not the one we think of first. But I want to switch gears completely to real life. So ready? Here's the challenge that we have. And I know we don't have a ton of time left. And so I'm just going to have this one as a fun thought experiment. So this is a real life application for us as adults. So let's say there's 11 hours of professional development next week. So here's a real thing all of us have faced as teachers, as team leads, as professional developers, as professors. 11 hours of PD next week, and there are 4 coaches and lead teachers, just 4 people, who are sharing the PD time, and everyone has to have the exact same amount. How much time is each educator going to get, and what do you call that amount? So now what I'd like you to do is, on the back of the sheet that you were just on, or on a new sheet of paper, I want you to draw how you would show splitting up 11 hours across 4 people. And it doesn't have to be pretty, and you don't have to share it. All right, so I'm going to pull you back together. I'm not going to ask you to share your picture. I know some people are like, I'm going to keep doing this. But you probably drew either some sort of a tape diagram, or you drew blocks and you started grouping them, right? Drew some circles, maybe did some distance, depending on what model you wanted to do. But what I want you to think about is that same thing that you did with the dandelions, because what we've now done is we've made thinking visible. And this is a real thing that we do. So a lot of folks would just hit division, right? And you would say, oh, I would just divide. We go straight to the algorithm because we're adults. But with our littles, we want them to actually spend the time thinking through, what does it mean to divide? And what it means to divide is to actually split something up. And when you make your thinking visible, you're drawing a picture, right? And so this is a really tough thing for students. And I'm going to show you an example of one that would be tough. So there's 7 brownies, 4 friends are sharing them, right? And they would all get exactly the same amount. How much will brownies would each friend get? And what do you call that amount? And so you might have students draw things. But here's the challenge. This is the critical thinking part. And this is where it gets ugly. If we show them how to draw the brownies every time, they're following a procedure that is teacher led. What we want to do is practice enough problems that they have a toolkit. I could draw a number line. I could count forward. I could make the separate chunks and then break them all up and then count them together. But if we don't give the wait time, if we don't have everybody share out like we did with the dandelions, then the students won't be able to get their thoughts in order. And we need to give them a chance to write the sentence. Because if they write the sentence of friend A or friend B, and they'll name them Charlie and Sam and Melody, and like they'll just name them Dante, like all 4, they're my 4 friends. And so if they can get into that, they are doing the sense making. But these kinds of tasks for math, this is with the cognitive writing, this is where the sense making happens. If we don't connect to the picture often, not always, but often, and then being able to come up with the explanation and then revise it, because they might get to the point where they can say, well, I know everybody gets at least 1, but I know they don't get 2. Fantastic. That's an excellent first 2 sentences. That's estimation. It's somewhere between 1 and 2, and I think it's closer to 2. Fantastic. How do you know it's not 2? And so when students are writing their thoughts down in cognitive writing, it gives a chance for their peers to engage in discourse with them. I agree with you. It's not 2, because that would have to be 8. How do you know that? I know 2 times 4 is 8. That's one of the facts that I actually am fluent in. And so I wanted to bring up that these are, hang on, these are real things. We talk about this stuff all the time. And if we make it something that we tell students, we talk about all the time. So we're choosing an elementary example, but this is something we do as adults. Then instead of going straight to an algorithm, we'll let them make sense of it. And like Danielle said earlier, they haven't done this before. So I have to be able to cue them. I have to be able to show them how to draw an arrow. If they picked a representation that isn't working for them, we need to go back and say, are there some other representations you want to shop from? But those things take time. And that's the thing about higher order thinking skills, which is we have to teach the higher order thinking skill, and all higher order thinking skills require wait time. There are no higher order thinking skills that do not require wait time. And we also can't leave them with discovery learning where they figure it out on their own, because the only kids who can learn that are the students who already know it. So I'm going to switch to a new example. So that was science, that's translating to math. This is why we do math tasks now. But I want to spend a few minutes with us as a group. So if you're driving, don't do this one. But if you're not, please open it up. What real humans do when they're together is talk about things like the news or current events or things that they're worried about, things that they're wondering about, things that relate to family and friends. And so I have a friend who actually is in our National Writing Project group. Julie is from Michigan, and Flint is always on their mind. Their family is in Michigan. She talks about this all the time. We've read some of these books. So Flint finally replaced its lead pipes. And this happened and was announced as of Tuesday, which was yesterday. So this is very current. So what I'd like you to do is, we're not going to draw any pictures. I promise. You are not drawing Flint, you're not drawing Michigan, and you are not drawing lead pipes. But what we're going to do is oh, Chris was born in Flint. Representing. I feel like we should all go off to the UP and like do all the things and be Northerners for a little while. So when we take a look at this, I want to switch gears. So we've talked about sense making in science. We've talked about some sense making in math, and we're going to switch gears and talk about some sense making in an informational text. So this is an informational text that would be absolutely appropriate for high school. It might even be appropriate for 8th grade. And so we're going to have an alone zone minute or two. You don't have to read the whole thing. I just want you to scan it over. I'll leave it up on the screen. And then we're going to come back together and we're going to see if we can formulate any questions about this, anything that we might have questions about. So read for questions. All right, I'm going to interrupt everybody for just a minute. I put some questions up on the screen. These are the 3 big questions from Notice and Note, Beers and Probst. So the first one is, what surprised me? It's not like a scary movie. It's not somebody jumping out from behind a door. It's just, what's a thing that you didn't know? What did the author think you already knew? Is there a vocab word they thought you knew? Did they think you knew what was going on in Flint? Did they think you knew some of these facts? And then is there anything that challenged what you knew? Is there anything that changed your mind, or did anything confirm something you already knew? So those are your 3 big questions to think about as you keep reading for another minute or two.
Can you put the passage back up?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
All right. Does anybody want to share something that surprised them that they hadn't realized? I will start with, I did not realize that complaints were ignored for over a year about foul smelling water coming from the taps. That's a long, if I lived with foul smelling water coming from my taps for a year, I would be very frustrated if nothing happened. So that was something that surprised me. Anybody have any things that changed their mind, things that confirmed, or something that they thought the author thought they already knew?
Well, this article made me think about a parent who we were going through eligibility with recently, and she said her kids were exposed to lead. And so, but she wasn't, I don't know if she was from Flint, Michigan, but I think it was another place. But she was just like, yeah, they actually had like a health inspector come, and she said all of her kids had been severely like exposed to it, and she had as well. But the children were like developing, and so
Yeah.
I couldn't
And
at the time think of the time frame when Flint happened, but yeah, now looking at it, it's like, yeah, that was just only 10 years ago. And her kids they're like younger
yeah.
than that. So it just kind of like lets you know that like this may not only be the only like really may not be the only place um that happened in. It could be
Absolutely.
more
So
widespread.
you're making that personal connection of, hey, I know somebody. Absolutely. Chris, you have something to add?
Well, I was looking at, what does it say? Without federal guidelines, some states began replacing lead service lines, which were considered public property, while leaving in place lead pipes running from the curb to the home. Yes, now I know why the city of Richmond, because that's where I live, came through and has replaced all of in the streets. They're making that process now by going through, and it's only the public. All right. So once it gets to my property line, they are not responsible for it. However, they have this grant thing that you can apply for when you want to replace your water line, which is probably lead. They will, you can get it at a reduced price, whatever. So reading that, I was like, oh, that's why this happened here in the city. Because I don't think it would have been they would have automatically decided to do that on their own. But it's happened all over here, tearing up the streets, and just, I mean, not only in my neighborhood, but around the city. So when I read that, I was like, oh, that's why they did it. Okay, now I got it.
Well, and thank you, Chris. That's another personal connection, right? So we can actually connect other things. That would be a great paired passage, wouldn't it? All those Richmond Times-Dispatch articles, we could pull those two things together. We have the beginnings of a text set. And I know that Dorothy, who loves a nice turn of phrase, so not only am I excited to see the when, which is a nice Awubis word for me to lift up as a mentor sentence, but when you have a lead pipe delivering our drinking water, as Chris has pointed out, it's literally flowing through a straw that is poison. And so I know y'all don't want to do this right now, but we probably could draw that, yes, and think through, okay, if We could decry that. We could say, where does the problem lie? And then we could lift up, hey, a lot of times when we're reading informational text, there's a diagram to point out this is a safe pipe and this is a safe sink, but this is not a safe straw in between. And so that sketch to stretch thing that's a technical term, sketch to stretch thing, routine protocol is a great way to get students getting into their higher order thinking skills. It's explicitly teaching them how to do it. It's giving them the tool. And then couldn't we turn around and start writing a few sentences about our response? I wonder, we could use a notice and wonder. I noticed this, I wonder this. And we could also go back and use the 3 big questions. The author thought I knew some of this. I did actually know some of these because I know a person who this has happened to. And then I wonder about this. So if we're thinking about, say, a high stakes writing test where you're supposed to make a personal connection, it would be a really great idea for students to get used to making these personal connections and thinking this way, because if the mental model is something that they're used to, the cognitive load goes down when they get a new thing. So we weren't thinking about Flint, Michigan and lead and water 20 minutes ago, but now we could have a wonderful conversation about it. We know some people, we know some places, we've made a personal connection. There's some local things. We have ideas for paired passages and maybe a text set. So just a lot of things there. I also want to lift up that we could probably find some contrasts and contradictions and numbers and statistics and quoted words in extreme and absolute language in that text set, which would give us the notice and note nonfiction signposts, and we could pull our evidence. And of course, we can always do our woobus and fanboys words. And I could probably turn around and come up with a topic sentence, a couple of reasons of why I was thinking a thing like, I think what happened in Flint was positive or negative, because it's a celebration, right? But it's also sort of a bittersweet celebration because it's got some negatives in it. I could put some reasons and evidence in there, and then I could write a conclusion. So that's a traditional form of writing. And what I want to lift up here is this is what real humans do when they're together. When we come together in discourse, when we're sitting around a table or driving with our friends or talking with our neighbors in the street, we talk about stuff like this. And so what we're doing right now is telling students, like, this is a real life skill. These are things that we do. And so I chose to pull up Flint because it literally was in the news and it does connect to something nearby. But it's also to tell students that this kind of thing is not just an activity for your teacher. It's what people do when they're together, because we're trying to make sense of the world around us. And sometimes the world around us doesn't make any sense. So I did want to say rubrics do help once we get into writing. Obviously, we have a middle school and a high school writing rubric, and then elementary's the 5th grade is a little bit different. I'm going to stay away from that for just a minute. Express lane edit items, I did put in a link to that. That comes from Jeff Anderson's Mechanically Inclined. We love Jeff Anderson. He's a Woobus and fanboys. But one thing that he talks about is sometimes when we use a rubric, it's too much for students to handle. And so he says, well, sometimes when I go into the grocery store, I don't have the energy to go through all of Food Lion today or Kroger today. So I'm not going to. I'm just going to go through Express Lane and check out 1 or 2 things. That's it. I'm going to do it myself. And so what he says is all we need to do is pick 1 or 2 things to check out, items to check out on. So we might just check out on connector words that show our arrows, like, hey, I said this dandelion got real fluffy, and I'm going to pick some connector words. It became fluffy. It developed seed heads. There we go. Like that's a lot of specific vocabulary right there. And then I might check out and have a receipt of, I changed my words. I added an Awubis word. I added a fanboys word. I added 2 details. And so these little slips, 4 to a sheet, are simply express lane edits. And I think that is a cute way to make things doable. And I did link in the solution tree PLCs that were collaborative team process for developing a rubric, just in case you end up making a rubric for something specific like that dandelion activity or a math task. So what? Who cares? A little beaker time. Why is cognitive writing important to me as a teacher? And then how will I use it with my students or my colleagues? I'm going to let you all ponder for yourselves because we're already at 2:19 and I knew I was going to max out the time on this one. But one thing to think in is if we don't take the time for cognitive writing, then we're actually going to sort of pay for it on the back end. So part of going slow to go fast is as students develop the skills to do some of this deep thinking, they're able to transfer that skill anywhere. So if we spend time at the beginning of the year slowing down and drawing and sketching to stretch and talking with our neighbors and adding in those connector words, then as we get into more topics throughout the year, even though that took a little while, right? Go slow. We will be able to use those protocols to get deeper faster into other things because students will recognize what it is. They'll be better at it. That cognitive load will go down. And even though I only have 4 spaces in my working memory to hold something, being able to do a notice in wonder or write that sentence and add an Awubis or fanboy word or switch it over into a tree or use a 3 big question, it's not taking up as much space anymore. It's just a thing that we do, just like lining up for lunch and walking down the hall and checking in your lunch number and doing all the things. The first week of school, they're overwhelming, but the last week of school, they're not. And so that's a big deal for this third bullet of vertical alignment. So if we can get a toolkit out there and we can get students getting used to things over the years, if they spent time on it in 4th grade, then in 5th grade, they're revisiting it and they're actually watering up the curriculum. And then this is a really awesome opportunity to use some of that student writing as student work samples. You could watch a video of the classroom to see who's engaging or who isn't, or we could always do some anecdotal notes. And so here's the idea. So going into this year, if we wanted to focus on some cognitive writing, you would have to figure out where you wanted to drop it on a calendar. Because if you don't write it down, it doesn't happen. And so it could be like every single unit, somewhere in the first week of the unit, we're going to make sure that one of those activities is actually really cognitive writing. Chances are there's something in there that is a math task. It is a science investigation or discussion or a science circle. There probably is something that's asking him to do evidence, but it's so easy to have that be the one thing that doesn't fit in for the week. And so what we might want to do is think through, well, I know I have to do this part and I know I have to do this part, but if we lift up the cognitive writing piece and all that processing piece, we actually get a huge payoff. And that payoff will be across content areas. And in iSchool, it will be across the years because the students will have it in their own toolkit. They'll actually have it for post-secondary. But you got to remind yourself, because in the moment with pacing and all those things, that's the thing that'll get cut. And we want to use the student responses to make decisions. So we're going to want to see what they're doing to see how fast they're soaking it up and if they need other scaffolds. And as I said at the very beginning, you definitely want to join us for the Tobrian cognitive writing, because we're going to have a science and a social studies specialist pull us together and really dig into how all the activities would connect and how all the cognitive writing pieces would be in sequence to do something that was in fact classroom ready. And then they'll also make the connections to ELA of how we can use those informational texts. And of course, we always have things like bringing in some of our literacy elements like a place to grow, and we can be creative that way. So Dorothy, we are in underneath the deadline of 2:30. Are there any thoughts, connections, next steps? Let me stop sharing.
So I'm not doing it anymore.
You've safely landed, Danielle.
I'm sorry, what?
It
I
sounds like
love
you.
the training. Wait, hold on. I'll just mute myself for a second. Hold on.
You good?
Danielle might be frozen. Oh, there
Okay.
she goes.
Hi, you guys. I'm back home now, but I really enjoyed this training. So, the one that you're talking about on July 30th, is that a part of this series? The series that we're okay, great.
And it's our favorite price, which is free.
Yeah.
All all are welcome. And Suzanne, it made me think a lot of my pre-service teachers and teachers just going out in the field, and they get so excited about different strategies, and they're looking at Pinterest and teacher pay teacher. And not that they're not cool things, because we all get excited, but they're doing a million different strategies. And then every lesson they're trying to teach the strategy, and they're spending so much time teaching the strategy that they don't get to the content. And I love how you present as far as if we can equip our students with this toolbox, and then we just keep using it the whole year to pull in all different content pieces that allows our students to really engage deeply with the work, because it is they don't have to take that cognitive load to learn this new thing. But it's like this stuff that can be, applied everywhere. And I think that's really beautiful.
And one thing that I've loved about we've got a lot of high quality instructional materials that school divisions have adopted in the last few years. If you have this lens and you start digging through, you'll start seeing the routines that you can add to the toolbox, and then you just lift those up as you hit them in the curriculum. And instead of being one more thing in the curriculum, it's suddenly like value added, like, hey, we're back in a notice and wonder. Hey, we're back in this, this writing strategy, and throw that up on an anchor chart on the wall and bring the kids back to it, because there's a really good chance that in the curriculum, they're going to hit it again and again, which lets us put it in their long-term memory. Because those curriculum writers had the same thoughts that we had of, hey, if I put this in here, maybe somebody will find it. Power of positive thinking here. All right, Dorothy, thank you for hosting us as always. And that is a little less than an hour and a half on an intro to rolling with cognitive writing across the curriculum.
I love it, Suzanne. Thank you for sharing your expertise. And we have the recording, so I'll be sending out the recording with the links to the Google Slides, so you'll have all the material. And yeah, thank you so much for coming. And Suzanne, do you mind if people reach out to you if they have questions?
Sounds good.
Okay, that is a beautiful, beautiful thing. Well, it looks, at least here, I'm in Richmond too, Chris. So it looks like the sun is kind of coming out. So enjoy the rest of the day. And thanks so much for being here with us. We really appreciate it.
Bye, y'all.
Bye.